Chapter 21, America's Victorian Age. America's Victorian Age was marked by useful inventions that made everyday life easier for everyone. It was also during this time period that recreation, including literature, music, and sports, became more popular as people had more leisure time. Victorian architecture. Homes built during the Victorian period are well known for their beauty and ornate design. Many of these houses are still used as residences even today. Look around your hometown sometime and see if you can spot any Victorian-style homes. I hope you're enjoying our stories of courage, determination, and invention. There are so many extraordinary stories that it will be nearly impossible to tell them all. I hope that I have succeeded in enticing you to want to know more, because that is my goal. No matter how long you live and how much you learn, there is always more. We have come to a place in our story where I feel the need to stop and look again at the backdrop of culture in our country. Just like we did when we studied the Wild West, we need to look at what life was like during this time of our study. The time of Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, and Helen Keller was called the Victorian Age. The Victorian Age in America was named after Queen Victoria of England. The time period from which the late 1830s through approximately 1901 was a time of great cultural change. Inventions, which made life easier, brought a more convenience-driven lifestyle. Electricity and the invention of the electrical light bulb improved many Americans' lives in big and small ways. Streets, department stores, small shops, and people's homes were brightly lit. Electric street trolleys carried passengers in comfort. Homes were also reflected the changed times. Many middle-class families now had paid servants. Before the Civil War, only the very rich had paid servants. Now it was common for families to have a housekeeper and a maid. Some even had a nanny and a butler. Also making life easier was indoor plumbing. Flushing toilets replaced chamber pots and outhouses. Telephones and vacuum cleaners were also becoming more commonplace. Of course, not everyone had these conveniences, especially in rural or poorer areas, until the next century. The word of the chapter is mansard roof, a roof that slopes on all sides but has a steeper slope on the lower half of each side. Mansard roof. However, they were exciting luxuries for the growing number of people who could afford them. Architecture of this time period is also very distinctive. Many houses were built to reflect the style of European Victorian houses. They were bigger, with distinctive mansard roofs. Inside these homes, the decor was richer than ever before. Tall ceilings, big windows, heavy ornate wood, and graceful arches were common. Elegant furniture and electric chandeliers became centerpieces of formal parlors. They replaced the rougher, more service-oriented pieces and gas lamps. Yes, America was definitely moving up in the world. More Americans were literate now, and new technology let publishers print magazines cheaply. The development of railroads also made it easier for people to receive magazines in rural areas. Reading these magazines became a popular pastime. The whole family would listen as one member read aloud. When you read a novel now, you can sit down and read it all at one time because you have the entire story in one book. But that was not the case for many readers in the 1800s. Books were expensive, but magazines were cheap. For that reason, most novels were first published a few chapters at a time in a weekly or monthly installments in magazines. They were called serial novels. If you really liked a story and wanted to know how it ended, you must wait months before you knew the ending. The wait time was part of the fun, though, because it made everyone even more excited when the next installment appeared. There are stories of people anxiously gathering to be the first to get the next copy of the magazine. Of course, it was not much fun if the magazine decided to stop publishing the story, and you never found out how it ended, which happens sometimes. At first, American magazines published works by English authors, but soon these magazines were publishing American authors. If you were with us in Volume 1 of America's Story, you'll remember reading about Harriet Beecher Stowe's famous book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. That was one of the first serial novels written by an American. The Victorian Age was a time of cultural change in more ways than architecture and literature. People had more leisure time, thanks to inventions that were making their lives easier, so this was a time of change and entertainment also. Have you ever been to a circus? I will never forget the first time I went with a friend and her family to a 3-ring circus. We had very good seats. The acrobats, clowns, and trained animals were almost close enough to touch. I remember sitting on the edge of my seat and holding my breath as a young performer, not much older than my own 11 years, swung up onto the shoulders of an older man who was standing on a tightrope. Sweat was glistening on their faces, and I could see the young acrobat's jaw clenching, even through his heavy white clown makeup. This circle was the Ringling Brothers, first established in 1884, during the Victorian Age. The 5 Ringling Brothers became famous for their show, and soon people all over the country were flocking to the circus. Music also became a popular pastime, as bands started playing uniquely American music called ragtime. These catchy tunes were very different from the traditional music people were used to. Band music became a symbol of being modern, and young people danced with the older crowd, watched with raised eyebrows. What could be more American than baseball? It was during the Victorian Age that this became true. The sport of baseball actually was brought to this country by the English and Irish immigrants who flocked to the American shores during this time. We will learn more about these people and how they came by the millions in our coming chapters. It seemed that Americans everywhere were becoming more American. It didn't matter if they were new or old Americans. Everybody brought their own flavor to the mix. Our country was certainly developing a flavor all its own. Nowhere in the world was there a culture like ours. A great sense of American pride and patriotism was born. America wanted to show the world what kind of success she was having. What better way to do this than by having a huge American open house in the form of a World Fair? And so it was in 1893, Chicago hosted the first World's Fair. We learned a little about this fair in the feature page for Chapter 8. More than 25 million people came and were astounded to see the electric lights and elaborate exhibits. Nowhere had there ever been anything like this fair. Can you imagine the scene? Sections of the fair were made to look like various countries around the world. There were Venetian-style gondolas carrying visitors through literally miles of exhibit. People would choose to spend the day browsing through the technical exhibits. Here they could see all the latest electronic inventions. Or maybe they would prefer going on the dozens of carnival rides. Better yet, why not go see a 1,500-pound chocolate sculpture? One of the most marvelous attractions at the World's Fair, quite literally, stood hundreds of feet above the surrounding exhibits. Have you ever ridden a Ferris wheel? If you have, you probably took a short ride in a car that held up to 6 people, and might have been excited to look out over the other smaller rides around you. This Ferris wheel at the 1893 World's Fair of Chicago was quite another story. A man named G.W. Ferris wanted to stun the world with his invention. This was not the kind of invention that would be mass-produced and sold at the local department store, however. This invention would only be used at this World's Fair. Its sole purpose was to shock and thrill the visitors. Work on this giant wheel went through the winter before the fair opened. Because it was going to stand 264 feet high, the support pillars had to be driven down deep into the ground. Work on the Ferris wheel started before work on any of the other exhibits. It took many men to build this colossal wheel. When it was complete, the great wheel could carry 2,160 passengers. There were 36 cabs, which were actually train cars, each carrying up to 60 passengers. How thrilling, and I am sure somewhat scary to ride that high up in the air. Airplanes had not been invented yet. The only way for people to get up that high was in a hot air balloon. The wheel was so tall that when people went on it at night, they felt they could reach out and touch the stars. 19, 1893 World's Fair maps. Maps of the 1893 World Fair in Chicago were a popular souvenir. Chicago, not only did they provide visitors with a practical guide to all the attractions, but they were also a great keepsake to remember the experience. Alongside the standard maps, trendy panoramic ones, there were also the unusual cane map. This souvenir was a walking stick that came with a map of all the sites. It is a wonderful example of the eccentric keepsake produced for this event. And here's pictures of the 19th century baseball. General Abner Dooley, and different things about the history of baseball. Have you ever been to a carnival or a fair? Each state in our country has its own yearly fair. These state fairs are usually showcase of that state's agriculture and other unique products. These fairs also usually have huge exhibit halls where individuals can show off their handcrafts and sewing skills. It's quite common to see beautifully crafted quilts and other handmade items in these halls. Also common at these fairs are carnival rides and amusement parkades set up on what is usually called the midway. That is all for now.